Hi, I'm Joel Wanasek. I'm a mixer and the co-founder of nailthemix.com. And today I want to rant it out and talk about another wonderful audio production topic. And that is the dying art of audio engineering. And it's something that I think is a real tragedy. It's something that we really need to sit down and try to combat in our industry and fix. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But before that, I just want to start off with an opportunity here. A lot of people watching this may be aspiring professionals that want to come in and, do this for a living. And to me, the interesting thing is, while a lot of people want to mix, for example, or a lot of people want to, master or produce, not as many people are jumping up and down to engineer. And I'm thinking to myself, if there is a niche that really, really, really needs great people and there's not enough of them, that's it. I mean, the amount of great engineers that come to mind, I can count on a few hands. I think of guys like Mike Plotnikov, who works for Howard Benson, or Hachinagaki, or, Like, these people are so good at what they do. Like, you will never even get, a B-level tone from them. You know what I mean? You'll never get anything subpar or anything mediocre. When you get tracks from somebody like that as a mixer, you're just like, what is everybody else doing and why are they not this good? You know what I mean? So it's really, really inspiring. So like I said, I can count on a few hands the people that I've worked with in my career that I think are just great engineers. There's not many. Now, it's interesting to me because I engineered for, I want to say 12 to 15 years or so approximately before I started mixing. And just 2016 is when that's all I started doing was just mixing, somewhere around there. And, made that full pivot. And I think to myself, I have mixed thousands of songs in my career, and the level of engineering I have seen is just going down and down and down and down and down and down. Now, obviously, if you're working with top tier, A-list professionals and stuff, you're going to get great stuff. But what I'm talking about is people that aren't the best in the world at what they do. You know what I mean? People that are kind of we'll call it the middle of the pack. The average of the middle of the pack is going down. And I find it concerning, but I also understand why. So let's talk about it today. Because like I said, I think if you get really great at this skill, if you want to get into this game, there's a massive opportunity, because so many producers that I know that I mix for need engineers, because while they're producing and their songwriting is incredible, their engineering is good, but it could be much, much better. And again, there's a job opportunity for somebody who can fill that gap. So let's talk about why. A couple of things. I guess we could start out with budgets, right? Budgets have gone down in the last 20 years. We all know why. We all have discussed it. I think in the last few years, and this is my opinion as a working pro, that I think that budgets are actually starting to go up again. And I see this all the time with people's mix rates, because I'm friends with a ton of mixers, friends with a ton of producers, production rates. I feel like budgets are on the way up again. And maybe there are people out there who disagree with me, but I'm just talking about music production, audio bands, working with artists. I feel like budgets have been going up the last couple of years, and they're trending upwards, and they're getting better. And music is coming back into the money, I should say, not music. Money is coming back into the music industry. And it's really, really exciting, because if you're working on signed bands and stuff like that, there's a lot of money that's starting to get kicked around again. And it's really exciting. And so I think because we had a lot of downsizing that happened in the last 20 years, budgets shrunk. A lot of people went in and started getting smaller setups that were more economical. So instead of big, massive studios that used to have tons of engineers on staff and producers coming through, people took things home. And of course, you're not going to have the gear to compete with something like NRG or Ocean Way. You know what I mean? And yes, gear matters. So not only that, but the environment and the competence. So back in the day, what would happen is people would go and they would intern in these really incredible facilities where the best artists and producers were coming through and the best engineers were working at, and they would absorb that. And that's how people learn this trade. Now we go online. And, while online education is amazing, what it's missing is accountability. And there's really no way to stand over somebody's shoulder and be like, hey, you're screwing that up. What are you doing? Do this, do that instead. You know what I mean? That person isn't in the room with you telling you all the mistakes. I'm a perfect example of that. I'm self-taught. I taught myself how to do this on the internet, just at home in my own studio, you know what I mean? In a basement. That's where I came from many, many, many years ago. And I understand the limitations of that model. It probably would have been better if I would have started off somewhere like in LA as a runner at a real studio and, got in and learned from the best of the best. So again, It's great that people can learn at home now and they can learn from the best and stuff like that. But like I said, that mentorship is missing in the world now, and that has consequences. And one of the consequences is the quality of tracking is going down. So that's an interesting thing that's changed. Budgets have gone down. The whole industry has changed. And, it's become a little bit more home-based or more like, more economical setups, right? People don't have access to, unless you're in a big city like Nashville or LA or whatever, you don't really have access to you can't just go down the street and rent the best microphones in the world or the best preamps or go record in a top level drum room on a vintage Neve console or something like that. You just can't. It just doesn't exist for so many people out there. But of course, that's not going to stop us from making productions, right? Because music needs to be created. So that has definitely lowered the bar for sure. Another reason that I think that engineering is kind of on the downhill is the barrier to entry. And the reason is it's like, if you want to mix a song, all you need is a laptop and some plugins and like a pair of headphones, not saying that you're going to you're going to beat CLA or Serban or somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be an actual mixer just by plugging in and getting these tools, but you can start mixing, right? So the barrier to entry is very cheap and affordable to do that. Now, if you want to be a great engineer and you don't own a drum room and you want to record drums, now you're looking at spending like $50,000 in microphones and preamps and things like that. You know what I mean? Like that costs a lot of money. If you want to get a bunch of guitar heads and guitar amps, guess what? That costs a lot of money, right? So the barrier to entering engineering is much higher than other things. Like if you want to be a songwriter, all you need is an instrument and, a DAW. If you want to write beats, that's simple. Just all you need is a DAW. So engineering actually has a very, very high barrier to entry for a lot of people because it's very expensive. You can either go work at a studio that's already built out and learn how to engineer there, or you can do it yourself in your own studio, which is going to be a substantial investment. I think another important point about why engineering is going down overall, on average, is that we have all these amazing mixing tools now that we didn't have before, and we have more access to them. If you wanted to mix before, you had to have like $1 million or $500,000 SSL in front of you. And like that was one of the only ways to mix 20 years ago, 25 years ago, right? Now you can go into your computer and you're like, oh, the guitars are harsh. Let's throw Soothe on them. Oh, I couldn't get my vocals to sound good, so I'm just going to EQ match them. And, I'm just going to load this preset chain from some mixer or something. So there's a lot of great mixing solutions now available to people that weren't before. So basically, I feel like the lack of knowledge on how to get great source tones and understand them and stuff is one thing. But a lot of people I feel like are settling and having lower expectations than before because they know they can just fix it in the mix. They're just like, I can't get the guitar. I mean, I see this all the time as the mixer. Like I get people that are like, we couldn't get the guitar tone we want, so we're just going to delegate this to you. I did a video. You can go watch it on what is mixing and what is not mixing. But a lot of things get delegated to the mixer because people want the mixer to kind of be the producer, even though they're the mixer, which is weird, but you know what I mean? Again, it's just a reality and a symptom of the industry and the way it works today and how it's changed. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma. If you're sitting there and you're recording something and maybe the musician isn't as good as you want them to be or whatever. And instead of coaching them, instead of like taking accountability as a producer, or doing whatever is necessary to get that performance out of that artist, it's just like, we'll edit it later, we'll mix it later, and we'll just fabricate it. As a result, we get subpar recordings. And guess what? Subpar recordings lead to not the best mixes. You need an amazing recording if you want to have an amazing mix, because amazing recordings mix themselves as opposed to having to just commit absolute surgery in a mix, which really I'll argue isn't mixing, it's almost producing. Okay. So that's the other dimension to this, is I feel like people they're having lower standards. They're settling for less, like just everything is going down. You see the trend? So like I said, to me, when I look at that trend, I think that's a massive opportunity. So the next question is, now that we know some of the reasons, and of course there's more, but just those are some of the main ones, that engineering is getting worse and it's kind of a dying art. Question is, what makes a great engineer for somebody who wants to become one? Well, there's a couple things. The first thing that I think is really critical to being a great engineer is being able to execute both the producer and the artist's vision, right? And figure out, the marriage of those and what that sounds like sonically. So a producer might come in and be like, I want this to be dark and ambient. And the artist might be like, I wrote this song when my mother took her life and I'm so sad and broken up about it. And, you as an engineer, you're like, that's the guitar tone we need for this song. I'm going to hook this into this, into this, into this, into this, plug in, let's go record this right now. You know what I mean? So the engineer really, really has to know how to execute a vision. Now, of course, you could be the producer as well if you're engineering, but if you're engineering, you have to be able to execute the producer's vision and the artist's vision, and you have to understand that. In order to be able to execute it, you really, really, really need to know your stuff, okay? And what I mean by that is you need to know your gear, you need to know your equipment inside out, and you need to understand tones and essentially be a tone encyclopedia, right? So when a band comes in and they're like, I'm trying to get a sound like Van Halen 1 for this guitar solo, a good engineer would be like, oh, okay, well, we're going to plug this in thing over here into this, and this. We're going to use this mic, plug in this guitar, and that'll get us in the ballpark. And the rest is up to the way that your hand plays and if you actually can sound like Van Halen on guitar, right? So, a great engineer knows equipment and knows how different types of equipment sounds, right? And is able to take that and to build a sonic landscape and to paint a sonic picture. And this is super important because, again, I think about early in my producing career, a band would come in and they would play a record. They'd be like, we want to sound like this. And, you're just like, wow, I don't know how they got the guitar tone right. Like, that's a bad place to be in. It takes years to get great at engineering, knowing the different pros and cons of where to put a microphone, how to get rejection, how to get the most voltage out of a performance and a signal, and nail the signal to noise ratio across everything, and how to, gain structure across multiple mics on something, you know what I mean? And just like a great engineer knows all of these things, how to get the most excitement and the most, excellent capture. How far should the vocalist be back? What angle should the microphone be from the vocalist to get the right tone out of their voice? What kind of technique should the singer do to get the S off axis so it isn't too harsh, on a particular microphone because it's SE, but the bottom end is the right, you know what I mean? Like, a great engineer knows all these things, and a great engineer knows how to coach the artist to become great. So a great engineer, first and foremost, executes the producer and the artist's vision very quickly and is just like an absolute encyclopedia of tones and tools. The next major criteria for an engineer, I think, to be great is they have to be an absolute master of psychology and performance. Okay. And what I mean by that is that music is human performance. It's singing, it's playing guitar, it's playing drums, it's playing a shaker or a maraca or a piano or an upright bass. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, there's a human performing, at least as of now. Maybe AI will change that someday, but hopefully never, right? So at least as of now, if you want to be a great engineer, you need to understand psychology, right? Because, let's face it, just like engineering has gone down in quality over the years, I feel like musicianship has. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe this is just me being a jaded mixer, but I definitely feel like, people aren't as good. I mean, obviously at the top, people are probably better than ever, but the standards have gone down. More people are creating music than ever, but just because somebody plays guitar for, let's just say 10 years, doesn't mean they know how to play guitar, if that makes sense. All right. Like, I'm a shredder. I've been playing guitar for over 25 years. And I know every nuance of pick attack and things like that. And when a guitar player walks into the studio and they've all been playing for a while, and their picking is wrong, and they've got bad fretting technique, and they're knocking notes sharp, and they don't even realize it because, again, no one ever sat down and taught them guitar technique. You, as an engineer, need to understand how a great performer plays versus a poor performer. And then you, as an engineer, need to be able to coach the artist to be able to perform at a higher level than they're at, or get a session musician, or just play it yourself. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it takes to make a great sound. So being a guitar player, I was always able to, take guitarists and just be like, hey, here's what you're doing wrong. Look how you're holding the pick. Change your pick to this. You're not holding your pick tight enough on your palm. You need to snap the string. You're a little bit too loose. You got to pick harder, but now you're picking out of tune. You're fretting too harder. Relax your wrist. Change the angle on your wrist. Now, when you're doing this chord, use the bottom of this part of your finger here to mute the string on this part of that octave riff. Okay, now it sounds cleaner. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be able to performance coach a musician, the singer. Hey, you're eating the mic. You're too close. You're getting proximity. Let's back you up a little bit. You're really essy. Let's change your enunciation and your diction and how you're pronouncing that word, because that me vowel is a little harsh and piercing. Let's make it more of like an A, like a may, you got to be able to coach the artist in real time to perform better and capture their vibe and help inspire them to become a good musician. If somebody can't play their instrument, which happens all the time, and they're not ready to record, it's your job as the engineer, right? Or even the producer's job to sit down and to psychologically work with them and show them how they can improve, what they can practice so you can get a better recording. Because if your musicians can't play, you're not going to get good tracks. And if your tracks aren't good, you're not going to get a good mix. And if your mix isn't good, you're not going to get a good master, and it's going to just suck. So an engineer knows how to work with people. The other part of that is a dynamic of working with a group of people. You know what I mean? Like, for example, you might have a singer and a drummer that hate each other. They can't stand to be in the room with each other, but the band is massive and they have to work together because the band is like a multi-gajillion dollar empire, and you have to put out records. You know what I mean? You have to get people that can't stand each other. So as an engineer, you got to be able to sit down with people and you got to be able to work with them and to diffuse conflicts and to get middle ground and to make people comfortable. For example, if you know the bass player and the guitar player hate each other, or they're always butting head and they get heated, do you want to have the bass player and the guitar player in the same room when you're tracking guitars or you're tracking bass? Absolutely not. So again, knowing how to psychologically work in those situations and to get the best out of people, how to inspire them to get better, how to coach them, how to be hard on them when they need somebody to be hard on them, how to be soft on them when they need somebody, you know what I mean? Like, these are different soft skills, and it's more than just putting a microphone where a microphone needs to go. I think the third and final trait of a great engineer is to be really, really efficient in their work, right? Because you know psychology and you are a tone encyclopedia, you know, you're just totally dialed in with that stuff. You need to be really quick. I'll give you an example. One time I recorded a record with this engineer, and, you know, we came in and, like, you know, it probably took him 3.5 hours to set up drums. He was like moving at a snail's pace. Now, of course, I'm paying him hourly, and naturally, being the, you know, intense personality that I am, I was pretty off about it, because I was like, dude, why don't you want to coil that cable a little slower, buddy? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's really important as an engineer to come in with and work with enthusiasm and speed, because if you know your stuff, you're going to be quick. It's like a band would show up and I would try to like double chime, set up their drums, like get the mics going, test, you know, I'd walk quickly. I'd coil mics as fast as mic cables as fast as I could, set up microphones, flip them out. Like, you know what I mean? Check phase, like just really knowing your gear and flying around and stuff and be able to go back and forth and get like a tone out of something and acting with urgency. That shows the artist that you respect their money and you respect their time. And it also gives you more time to focus on the human part, which is performance, and less on the technical stuff. So a great engineer knows their crap. They know what equipment they have, how it works, how to troubleshoot it when it goes down. They set things up quickly. You know, they know exactly what to plug into what mic to use, et cetera, to get great sounds right off the cuff. You know what I mean? Like, a great engineer acts, in my opinion, with confidence and speed. And when an artist sees that, that's going to inspire confidence in them and confidence in you as an engineer. And they're going to feel more comfortable. They're going to open up more, which is a psychological thing, right? And they're going to perform better. They're going to do a much better job. So a great engineer to me is someone that shows you through their actions and their words, but most importantly, their actions, that they're there to kick some butt and do a great job, and they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? So that is super important. Well, all right, I'm going to leave it there. That's enough for this video and wrap it up. Like I said, I think one of the best opportunities right now in the game is for people that want to be great engineers, because there's so few of them. You know, like, how many times, because now we have amp sims and modelers, does somebody sit down in a room full of amps and take time to really like learn what they all sound like? You know, like, where would I want to use a 75 Celestion versus a 30, or a G12H30, you know, or a greenback, you know, or like, this is a dying art, you know, like, it's good when producers can flip through presets and stuff and get tones really quick. But at the end of the day, if you want the best of the best, you need to learn how to engineer. So somebody out there watching this, I hope this inspires you to help us restore great engineering to this industry. So those of us that mix, you know, the producers, the artists, the label, like, we can have better sounding work, because it all starts with great engineering, and great engineering is so important to this industry. And so few people put any effort or any time into it. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Hats off and respect to the great engineers in this game. You're inspiring. And, you know, like I said, every time I get a mix from somebody who's a fantastic engineer, I'm just like, this is the best day of my life, because it doesn't happen that often. So much love and respect to the great engineers in the world. If you like this type of comment, please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're ranting it out, doing reactions to different mixes and breaking them down. You know, we're doing something every week here on this YouTube channel. If you got anything you want me to rant about or any particular topics, you leave that comment down there, and I'll check it out and try to get to it and talk about it on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to learn how to mix, nailthemix.com. And I'm always doing mixing content on my Instagram and TikTok. That's at Joel Wanasek. Thank you so much for watching, and happy mixing, everybody, or I should say happy producing.